Hello everyone, and happy Halloween! The spooky season is coming to its end, and it means that it's time for Halloween specials. People who have been following my channel for a while probably noticed that in here spooky season never ends, and to be fair, most of my works could work as a Halloween doll. So this year I decided to do something special and picked a character from your suggestions. Nikki at YouTube suggested me to make Katrina from Sleepy Hollow in her iconic stripy dress, and I was very excited to try make it because her dress is very interesting from a tailor's point of view, and I'm looking forward to solve its secrets and recreate it in a doll's scale. As a base doll, I picked Apple White from Ever After High because I think their round face mold will work best for Christina Ricci. This head had some slight discoloration around her hairline from the glue, but I hope it will be gone after I shrink it in acetone. I wish I could keep her original hair, but that factory glue just makes it impossible. I don't understand why Mattel used this glue for these dolls while they clearly have other methods like melting the roots, and they always do it for Barbie. Honestly, I can't recall a single Barbie with glued hair. In this project I decided to try use natural goat hair for rerouting. Because this hair is very voluminous, I advise to use a slightly bigger needle for rerouting. I use just normal sewing needles and crop them myself. Now I need to sketch the new split to make sure it's a straight line. With a bigger needle I poke new holes and then plug in the hair. The first bundle didn't work as good because I ended up with some short hair from the end sticking out, so I cut them with scissors and later put the hair from the inside to make these ends go inside the head. Later I learned to cut the end in a straight line before plugging it, and it solved the problem. First I rerouted the split and hairline and checked how it covers the scalp. At this point it looked like she has a lot of hair already, so I decided to plug a bit less hair on the scalp itself. I also rerouted a second horizontal split on the back of her head, just in case there won't be enough hair for her hairstyle. Looking back, I'd rather use less hair on the back and a bit more for the first split, because so much volume on the back made it more difficult to style. But if you never try, you will never know, right? For fixing the hair, I used all-purpose glue as usual, and after it dried for a few days, I brushed her hair with a cat brush to remove all the hair that wasn't plugged in but just stuck to the other hair. I gathered them with a ribbon instead of an elastic because elastics can damage natural hair, covered it with plastic wrap, and now she is ready for the face-up. It's not a portrait doll, but I still tried to make her look as close as possible to Christina Ricci and made the eyes more round with little baggies, which made her look a bit more tired than the character in the movie, but maybe a bit more relatable for us. For me it was also a new experience because I like giving them strong and dark makeups, and this girl needed a no makeup, so I had to play a bit more with blushing, which I rarely do, and tried to avoid using black and replaced it with dark brown, that's almost black. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like Christina Ricci doesn't look like herself in this movie. Like, I couldn't recognize her with blonde hair. I had the same problem with Orlando Bloom when he played Legolas in a blonde wig, but then suddenly had his natural hair and brown eyes in the Pirates of Caribbean, and I couldn't believe it was the same person. And I was making fun of the police in GTA who can't recognize you anymore after you paint your car. I think she's a perfect cast for Katrina though, because she has this cute round baby face that perfectly suits the innocence of Katrina. And she also looks like Tim Burton's eyes came to life. Another interesting thing in Katrina's appearance is that she has blonde hair and dark brown eyes, which is a rare combination, just like black hair and blue eyes. And I think people find these two combinations appealing not only because it's unusual, but because there is high contrast between the hair and eyes, and it makes the eyes more expressive. Being addicted to contrast myself, I still wasn't able to resist adding some black, at least to her eyelashes and irises, and some dark red shadows on her lips. In the movie, she is wearing a light, rather orange lipstick that is a perfect pick for her color type, and it complements her look by highlighting her natural beauty by adding just a little subtle accent to her lips. And in my face up, I also made an accent on her lips and very dark irises. I also used a little bit of blue in the corners of her eyes to deepen the shadows and make the skin look more natural. And on the eyelids I used some purple for the same reason, just I wanted it to not be as strong as the blue shadows. After spending 2 days on layering her face up, I was finally happy with it and glossed her eyes and lips with enamel paint. It certainly makes colors pop more and improves the overall look, but makes it very difficult to take good pictures of the face up because the gloss is too reflective. This one is probably the cutest face up I ever made. She looks so sweet. I don't know what happened, but I think my last 2 face ups turned out really great. It's not very humble of me to say that about myself, but as my mom always says, if you won't compliment yourself, nobody will. Now I need to put her head back on her body. After shrinking, I need to use a Dremel to remove some material from her neck hole, but I mostly use it to warm up the vinyl and make it more flexible, just in the area I need it to be flexible. Now her hair. I tried to curl them using flat iron as usual, but the hair was too puffy and difficult to work with, so I'd probably have to straighten them first and then curl. And I thought, why would I burn this soft natural hair if I can just restore the natural curls this goat had? So I just washed her hair with water and brushed in some no-rinse hair conditioner with just my fingers, and the hair curled up on its own. I think if I used hair texturizer people use for taking care of their natural curls, the results could be even better than this, but even now I think she looks very good already. I think natural goat hair is just perfect for natural curly looks, but only if you don't want to style it, because using a brush would ruin the curls and the hair is sticking out in all directions. I didn't use a brush, but I still lost some curls from just splitting her hair and trying to gather them on the back. I start with separating the baby hair around her face and then gathered the hair from around her face on the back. I did this step in sections to make sure the hair is laying as smooth as possible with curls still being defined and naturally falling down from the split. Then I shortened the baby hair with a razor and shaped them with a little bit of styling foam. In this last scene in the movie where Katrina is wearing a stripy dress, her hair looks like it was curled, but in the rest of the movie she has natural waves just like the ones the doll has now, so I think it still works well and suits the character. I'm still not happy with the little hairs sticking out, but I think overall she looks good. Now let's finally make her a dress.
My favorite part of the game.
I couldn't find a good Ever After High pattern in my folder, so I had to make a new one from scratch. On the mock-up I drew both a basic pattern and Katrina's dress pattern so that I could use this base for other dolls in the future as well. I opened the chest dart into the neck hole this time because in Katrina's dress a chest dart is hidden behind the ruffles. You can actually see it if you look at the shape of the stripes in this area and how they get thinner and take a little turn around the breast. This dart is also one of the things that makes these stripes on the side of the bodice diagonal, but we will talk about it a bit later. Now I need to figure out the cut itself. I combined the waist dart with the chest dart and then moved all the lines I drew on the mock-up to the blueprint. If you look carefully at Katrina's dress, you could see that it doesn't have a side seam. So to make the pattern movie accurate, I would have to combine the dart from the side seam with the back dart and get a solid piece like this. But I decided that it's unreasonable to do that for a doll because I would end up with 4 seams meeting in one spot on the back, and together with allowances it would make 12 layers of fabric overlap there. So I decided to stick to the usual cut with a side seam and a simple sleeve with only one seam as well. For the dress I found these 2 stripy fabrics. I think the one with bigger stripes would fit better proportionally, but for the dress I need stripes in 2 sizes, so I'm gonna use the one with smaller stripes as the main fabric anyway. When placing the pattern on the fabric, I placed stripes along the side seams. Side seams on the pattern are diagonal lines, so it made the stripes on the bodice turn diagonally, plus closing the chest dart will turn the stripes even more. Katrina's dress doesn't have side seams, but stripes are placed along her sides, where side seams were supposed to be, so it has the same effect as well. In the middle of the corset we have this long and thin element with a round tip. It would be difficult to preserve this line with just sewing a skirt to it or even with folding the allowances to the inside and ironing them first. So I'm gonna use a little trick and make the front part out of 2 layers of fabric. I sew them together along the bottom line, cut the allowances and turned it inside out. And that's how I got a perfect and symmetrical curve in here. Then I attached the sides of the bodice and the sleeves to it. At this point I remembered that I forgot to add one little adjustment that is likely to ruin the entire bodice. So I only attached one sleeve and tried it on first. At this point it seemed that the neck hole is just a little bit loose, but I could fix it by increasing the chest darts. So I attached the second sleeve and the problem I had foreseen became obvious.
Long has he foreseen this doom, foreseen and done nothing.
The armholes were too tight for her joints and they pushed the entire bodice up. That's what made the neck hole appear so loose. You see, ever after high dolls have very small round shoulders that are way smaller than the ball joints in their arms. So if we try to project our pattern on the doll, the shoulder seam has to go not along the doll's actual shoulder, but draw the new line from her neck to the joint. For this, I recommend to either put a piece of paper on the shoulder while making a mock-up, or simply add like 3 mm to the shoulder height by cutting and spreading your pattern like this. Even though the shoulder seam is not going over the joint in the dress, its seam allowance still does, and that's what pulls the dress up. If you are making a sleeveless dress, this step can be ignored though. I don't want to redo absolutely everything, so I'm going to at least reuse the front bit. And here's a new bodice. It's not completely done, but you already can see how much better it covers the shoulders. In this attempt, I also made one of the sides of the chest darts go along the stripes, which made it look way better quality. I really like when designers are playing around with fabric patterns like these stripes, for example. It can make even simpler cuts look like a designer piece. I often saw this approach in retro clothes. A good example would be the swimsuit of the first Barbie as well. Remember times when fashion dolls were dressed in quality outfits?
I remember. Remember Reagan?
Remember? Looks much better now, right? Next, I'm going to attach lace to the neck hole. If you zoom in to her outfit, you can see that there is the same trim going along her bodice and skirt, but along the neck hole there's a layer of laces looking out. So I'm adding it as well. Next up is her skirt. I roughly measure the width around the doll and divide it by 2. This will be the front of our skirt. Then I also trace the corset onto it to see which part overlaps and where I can place gathering. I'm going to gather the front only on the sides. Then I need to find the height of the ruffles. I took a picture of her real dress and measured the length of the skirt and the height of both ruffles. I also know the length of my doll's skirt, which is 17.5 centimeters. So now I can use proportions to find out what size my ruffles need to be. At this point, I started to feel that I won't be able to gather so much fabric in that little piece of corset, so I decreased the width of the skirt a bit. I'm going to use small stripes for the skirt itself and wider stripes for the ruffles. I think this was my most favorite detail of this dress. When I first looked at her skirt, I noticed that all the stripes were aligned, even though these bits were gathered. And I was like, how the hell they did that? And when I looked carefully, I noticed that the stripes on the ruffles are just wider. I know this had to be more obvious than seams, but I was looking at the seams to understand the cut and not the whole picture. So my wide stripes are approximately 2 times wider than the small ones, so their details must be 2 times wider than the blueprint I made. I marked the start of the ruffles on the skirt and then I drew a second line 5 mm lower. It is the place where its seam allowance ends. And 5 mm is a standard allowance I use for doll clothing. I plan to use this line as a guideline for attaching the ruffle. It's like a giraffe but a ruffle. And now is my favorite part. I need to fit every wide stripe into a small one to make all stripes aligned. This operation requires precision, so I'm going to sew them by hand. I think the stripes look good, but after ironing they will look even better. Then I attached the second ruffle and also by hand. I think here it wasn't important if stripes are aligned or not, but I did it anyway just to make sure that the gathering is spread evenly. Now I need to sew the sides of the upper ruffle to the skirt. I made this ruffle a bit longer, just enough for it to cover the seam from the bottom ruffle. But because of this difference, I had to place the side seams a bit diagonally. I think this detail only highlighted the ruffles and made the skirt look even more interesting though. And I also decided to make the back of the skirt in a cone shape, because there will be a second layer of fabric with a lot of gathering, and I didn't want to have that much fabric on the waist. And I also made a mistake by looking at some blurry reference pictures from the internet, and I saw the stripes on the back look diagonal, but it turned out to be a piece of chain and not her lower skirt. I will fix this later, but for now it will stay like this. At this point I didn't know if I want to make the skirt a separate piece or attach it to the bodice, so for now I just pinned them on the doll and moved on to the chain. Again, if we look at the stripes, we can see that they go along the edge, which means that this element is actually rectangular. And on the back they start taking a diagonal turn because of the gathering or maybe dots. So for now I'm going to just cut a square piece of fabric and try to shape it and see how much fabric I need to be able to make a smoking like this. After playing around with the test sample, I figured that the train needs to be at least 20 centimeters wide to feed all the elements and be puffy enough. Then I prepared an actual detail I'm going to use for the dress. I hemmed it with lace because in Katrina's dress she has these two spots in the bottom where the wrong side is visible, so we need to make it look nice as well. I start shaping it by making folds on top. At first I folded them towards the edge to make the folds press it to the dress and make sure the insides are not visible. But with the skirt folded like this, it was difficult to shape these snails on the sides because the snails go to the opposite direction. So I had to undo the skirt and fold it the other way around. Just as I worried, now the folds were pushing the edge up and exposing the wrong side of the train. But it really helped to solve the shaping a snail problem. At this point I decided that it's necessary to sew the bottom skirt to the bodice, so if something I can also sew the train to it at least at some spots to make it stay in place. When sewing the skirt to the corset, I purposely connect stripes of the opposite color to visually separate the bodice from the skirt. Now I can continue working on the train. It seemed simple at first, but took me 2 days to figure out the smoking. I genuinely couldn't understand how they made the ends of the stripes on the sides go into this folded triangle and where this triangle even came from. The snails were also quite problematic and I almost made a hole in fabric from redoing it again and again, but in the end I still managed to come up with something that looked right. And now I need to fold the other side symmetrically without remembering how I even managed to fold the first side. I started with spinning the snails on the sides and then started shaping the bottom, starting from the center. I made a fold first and then shaped this mysterious triangle, tackled the edge and ended up with something. Now the train looks a bit long and flat, but the middle snail must push it up a bit. I replaced pins with stitches and then formed the last snail and closed the back seam. Now I need to add a trim to the bodice and skirt. In the original dress, it consists of several layers, so I tried to make something similar out of lace because it's thin, soft and is not fraying. But it looked kinda messy, so I decided to cut a striped ribbon out of fabric I used for the ruffles and just secure its edge with fray check liquid. Fray check made it a bit stiffer, but it was still making nice gatherings and looked way better quality than the lace option, so I chose it instead. And I think the result looks perfect. I made the first sleeve off camera and here I used the white lace trim, one wider trim I made of the stripy fabric and the same trim I used for the bodice. But don't worry, I'll show how to attach them on the second sleeve. First you need to put something in the sleeve to make sure you won't gather it or accidentally sew it to itself from the inside. You can use a straw, a pen, anything that fits in. And then I start sewing the first trim, starting from behind the seam on the sleeve. It's good to make these two things a bit misaligned because the trim ends will overlap each other and it's better to not add extra layers on top of the seam. And here's what I got. I think it looks symmetrical enough. Now I could call it a day, but I really hated how the stripes on the back of the skirt were placed, and it also didn't have enough volume to support the train. I could solve the second problem with a petticoat, but the stripes were really bugging me. I was hoping the train would cover them, but the corners were still visible, so I decided to redo the skirt, but not completely, of course. I'm going to cut the back of the skirt 1 cm away from the waist seam and then attach a new piece to it. Like this, the seam allowances from the skirt will stay just below the seam allowances of the train, and I will avoid the bulk but still have the volume I need. And most importantly, have parallel stripes all around the skirt. And I also matched the stripes, so now you can't even tell if there is a side seam at all. Replacing this element took me another 4 hours and I had to work through the night, but at least I could go to bed feeling at peace. Now we only need to add a few accessories and she will be done. I'm going to reuse these Monster High shoes because I think they are nice and fit both the time period and the character. I sanded them, cleaned them with alcohol, primed with MSC and painted them black using acrylic paint. Then I sprayed them with MSC again and painted the metal elements. Very simple but elegant.
Eleganto! Very eleganto!
And at last I need to make her a bow. Katrina has a puffy bow made of at least 2 types of ribbons, white and stripy. I used an organza ribbon but added black stripes to one of them with the sewing machine. And now we can put everything together. She is such a cutie, I can't stop looking at her. Let me know in the comments section what you think about this project. I liked working on it a lot because I enjoy sewing the most, and I know that I'm good at it. Who knows, maybe that's why I enjoy it the most as well. This year I was mostly sculpting and it kinda made me feel like I was losing myself. But this dress was a fun riddle to solve despite all the struggles and flops I had, and it helped me to remember why I even learned pattern making in the first place. So if you like this video and have another interesting costume you'd like me to make, let me know. I think this kind of content could help not only doll customizers but also cosplayers, so maybe it would be a good idea to actually concentrate on sewing rather than sculpting. And it is the only field where I actually have qualification and can teach something. Judging from the comments, I think many people appreciate pattern making and sewing tutorials, so I would like to hear your opinion very much. Off camera I also made her a little necklace. Putting it on her was another circle of hell, but at least it looks good. If you like this video, give it a like to help my channel grow. And if you would like to support my channel further, you can also join my Patreon for more in-depth content or buy me a coffee. All of the links you can find in the description box. Even though I started Patreon now, my giveaway offer for Buy Me a Coffee still works. For every 100 coffees I reach, I'll make a giveaway and the winner will get a custom doll commission. Each coffee equals 1 entry. Thank you very much for spending your time with me and I hope to see you soon in my next video. Bye!